They tried. That is the part nobody tells you. That is the part that gets lost in the narrative of the avoidant as someone who simply didn't care enough, didn't try hard enough, didn't love you enough to stay. The part that gets buried under the silence and the distance and the slow withdrawal that felt, from where you were standing, like indifference, made architectural. They tried to stop, not once, not in a single clean decision that they then lived out with conviction, but repeatedly, in the way that people try to do things their entire system is working against, imperfectly, inconsistently, with the specific exhaustion of someone fighting a battle on the inside that they cannot show anyone on the outside. They told themselves it wasn't that serious. They constructed the narrative of incompatibility with genuine effort, not lying exactly, but selecting, emphasizing, building a case from real materials because the alternative was admitting something they did not have the architecture to admit, that they were in love with you, that you had gotten through, that the thing they had spent their entire adult life preventing from happening had happened anyway, quietly and without permission. Somewhere in the middle of an ordinary conversation, or an unremarkable afternoon, or a moment so small they couldn't even identify it afterward, they tried the distance, allowed it to grow, measured it, felt the familiar relief of space, and told themselves the relief was confirmation. Told themselves that if they truly wanted you, they wouldn't be capable of the distance. They didn't understand, or wouldn't let themselves understand, that the relief of distance is not evidence of not loving. It is evidence of the terror of loving. That the desperate need for space is not indifference, but its opposite. That the avoidant creates distance precisely and specifically because what is on the other side of the distance matters too much. They tried staying busy, filled the hours with the alternative content of a life that looked, from the outside, like someone who had moved on. New projects, old friendships, the forward-facing momentum of productivity. They built the appearance of a life that didn't have your absence at its center. And some days it worked. The filling worked, and the hours passed, and the thing they were feeling stayed below the surface where it could be managed. But the nights were different, and the quiet moments and the specific, unpredictable, can't be scheduled away moments when something in the day, a quality of light, a song, a thought that arrived from nowhere, delivered you back to them with a completeness and a force that the productivity could not prepare for, and the distance could not prevent, and something inside them refused. The refusing. Let's talk about the refusing, because it is the most important thing, more important than why they ran, more important than the attachment wound, or the nervous system response, or the deactivating strategies, or any of the psychological machinery that has already been mapped in detail. The refusing is the love itself, in its purest, most stubborn, most inconvenient form. The avoidance system is extraordinarily good at many things. It is good at creating distance, good at constructing narratives that justify the distance, good at identifying incompatibilities and magnifying them, and using them as evidence that the leaving was not fear, but wisdom, good at staying busy, staying contained, staying ahead of the feelings that are always just behind. But it is not good at one thing, making the love stop, because the love does not live in the part of the avoidant that their system controls. It does not live in the conscious mind that constructs the justifications. It does not live in the nervous system that fires the alarm when intimacy deepens. It does not live in the deactivation strategies or the withdrawal protocols or the rules that have been governing their relational life since before they had language for what a rule was. It lives somewhere older than all of that, somewhere more fundamental, the place where actual attachment is formed. Not the performed attachment of early connection, not the managed warmth of someone who finds you interesting enough to engage with, but the real thing, the bone deep, cannot be argued with, refuses to respond to management thing. That place does not take instructions from the nervous system, does not respond to the self-sufficiency narrative, does not cooperate with the project of moving on. It simply persists in the way that things persist when they are real, quietly, without drama, indifferent to whether their persistence is convenient, showing up in the unguarded moments, regardless of how many guarded moments the avoidant has successfully maintained, refusing to file you under resolved, refusing to convert the attachment into the past tense, refusing fundamentally to stop. What the refusal looks like from the inside. The avoidant experiences the refusing as a problem to be solved, not as love, or not initially, not consciously. They experience it as a malfunction, as the system not working the way it is supposed to work, because the system is supposed to be reliable. This is what they have come to trust about themselves, that when they create distance, the distance works. That when they decide to disengage, the disengagement happens. That the self-sufficiency is not just a narrative, but a genuine capacity, the ability to close off, to contain, to process, and move past. They have done this before, with other connections, other intimacies, other people who got closer than comfortable and were subsequently managed back to a safe distance. The system worked. The distance was created. The feelings, whatever they were, eventually quieted. The attachment loosened. Life reorganized around the new configuration, and the old configuration, however it had felt in real time, became history, became something they had moved past. But with you it doesn't work. The distance doesn't quiet the feelings. The narrative of incompatibility keeps encountering evidence against itself. The feelings that were supposed to diminish with time and space and the forward momentum of a reorganized life simply don't. They maintain their volume, their specificity, their particular and irreducible quality of being about you, exactly you, not a generalized longing but a precise and located wanting that has your name on it and responds to nothing that isn't you. And the avoidant, encountering this malfunction in a system they have always trusted, does not immediately recognize what it means. They diagnose it as a problem of insufficient time, or insufficient distance, or insufficient commitment to the project of moving on. They increase the input, more time, more distance, more productivity, more alternative content, and the refusing refuses harder. This is when something starts to shift in their understanding, not dramatically, not with the sudden clarity of a revelation, but gradually in the way that reluctant recognitions always arrive, sideways, in the peripheral vision, seen first before they can be named before they can be fully accepted. The recognition that the malfunction is not a malfunction, that the system has not failed, that something else has simply turned out to be stronger than the system. The specific moments, the refusing surfaces. It surfaces in the things they cannot predict and cannot prevent, the moments that arrive without warning and deliver the full weight of the attachment before the management protocol has time to engage. It surfaces when they hear something, a piece of music, a reference, a way someone phrases something, that belongs in the specific geography of their interior to you, not to a generalized memory of the relationship, to you specifically, the way you said a particular thing, the specific cadence of how you thought about something, a humor that was distinctly yours. It arrives and the recognizing is involuntary and complete, and for a moment that is longer than a moment, the distance they have been maintaining collapses entirely. It surfaces in the dreams. The avoidant does not choose their dreams, cannot schedule them, cannot edit them, cannot apply the management protocol to the hours when the conscious mind releases its grip. And in those hours, you are there, not always dramatically, sometimes simply present in the landscape of a dream, in a way that leaves no particular image, but a particular feeling on waking. The feeling of your absence as a fresh thing, as something that has just happened rather than something that has been managed into the past tense. They wake with the weight of that and spend the morning suppressing it back down. It surfaces in the comparative, in every subsequent connection they attempt or encounter, the way the new person, whoever they are, fails to produce the specific quality of aliveness that was present with you. Not because new people are inferior, but because the nervous system is calibrated without the avoidance permission to a particular frequency. And the particular frequency, the specific texture of what being known by you produced, is not replicated by proximity to other people who are by any objective measure entirely worthy of connection. The avoidant notices this, tries not to notice it, notices it more. It surfaces in what they cannot say out loud, in the conversations they have in their head that are still, months or years later, addressed to you, in the news they would have shared, the observations they would have made, the small and inconsequential debris of daily life that used to find its way to you as naturally as breathing, and that now has nowhere to go. It accumulates, all the little things that were always yours, having lost their destination, piling quietly in the interior in a way that the avoidant cannot clean up and cannot ignore. That accumulation is the refusing in its most ordinary and most devastating form. Why the refusing is not the same as being ready. This is where the most important distinction of this entire conversation lives. The refusing, the love that persists despite every effort to stop it, is not the same thing as the avoidant being ready for the relationship. This needs to be held with both hands, because the temptation, when understanding that the avoidant tried to stop loving you and something refused, on absorbing the weight of that, the reality of that, the genuine and ongoing nature of what they carry, is to convert that understanding into a particular kind of hope. The hope that the refusing constitutes readiness, that the persistence of the love is evidence that they are available for the love. That if they love you this much, through this much trying to stop, then surely the love is enough to override the fear. Surely what is refused to leave is also what will make them capable of staying. But love and readiness are not the same thing. They can coexist. They often do in people who have done the work of becoming available to what they feel. But in the avoidant who has not done that work, love and readiness can exist in complete, sustained, agonizing independence. The love is there, genuinely stubbornly refusing to stop there, and the fear is also there, the nervous system that experiences closeness as threat, the architecture of self-sufficiency that cannot yet hold the weight of genuine dependency, the rules that were built before the love arrived and are not automatically dissolved by its arrival. The love and the fear are not in competition in the way that the movies suggest. That love, if it is strong enough, defeats fear. That is not how the avoidance interior actually works. The love and the fear coexist. The love refuses to stop. The fear also refuses to stop, and the avoidant is living in the middle of both of them, managing the unbearable tension between what they feel and what they can sustain. The refusing is real. It matters. It is not nothing, and it is not the same as nothing. But it is not by itself enough. What would actually be enough? What would be enough? What would convert the refusing into something that could actually become a relationship, an actual sustained present tense love between two people who are both genuinely there, is something the refusing cannot provide. It would require the avoidant to do something with the refusing, to turn toward it rather than away from it, to stop treating the persistence of the love as a malfunction to be corrected, and start treating it as information, as the most honest data point their interior has ever produced about what they actually want and what they are actually capable of feeling. It would require them to enter therapy, or whatever form of genuine self-examination is actually available to them, and look, honestly, without the protective mediation of the self-sufficiency narrative, at the wound, at what was learned in the beginning, at the specific and comprehensible and genuinely heartbreaking story of how a person becomes someone who experiences love as threat, at the origin of the rules, at what the rules were protecting, and whether that protection is still necessary in the present tense. It would require them to practice, not understand, not intend, but actually practice staying in the discomfort of intimacy rather than exiting it, to feel the alarm fire and not immediately act on the alarm, to develop, incrementally and imperfectly, the capacity to distinguish between the alarm that signals real danger and the alarm that signals the nervous system's memory of danger, that no longer exists in this form. It would require them to tell someone, possibly you, possibly a therapist, possibly themselves in the honesty of their own unguarded interior, the truth, the simple, terrifying, long avoided truth, that they are in love with you, that the trying to stop has not worked, that something in them, more fundamental than the system, refuses. And then it would require them to decide, not in a moment of emotion, not in the urgency of the super-empath detachment or the relief of renewed contact, but in the ordinary and sustainable and daily repeated way that actual decisions are made, to choose the love over the fear, not once, every time the fear returns, which it will, not as a dramatic final battle, but as the ongoing, ordinary, every time intimacy deepens work of being someone who is consciously rewiring the most fundamental patterns of their interior life. That is what would be enough, and it is enormous, and it is possible, and it cannot be done for them, or inspired into them, or loved into existence by the quality of your patience. It can only be chosen by them. What you do with knowing this, you know now. You know that they tried to stop and something refused. You know the refusing is real. You know the love is not something you imagined or projected or constructed from the raw material of your own wanting. The connection was mutual. The love was real on both sides. The thing you felt certain of, in the moments when the walls came down and something genuine came through, was not wishful thinking. You were right. And here is what that knowledge does and does not give you. It does not give you certainty about the outcome, does not tell you that the refusing will eventually produce the readiness, does not promise that the love that couldn't be stopped will also prove impossible to keep contained indefinitely, does not hand you a timeline or a resolution or the ending you deserved but may not receive. But it gives you something else, something that is, in the long run, more valuable than certainty. It gives you back the truth of your own experience, the truth that you were not alone in this, that the love you felt was not a solo performance, that you were not foolish or deluded or excessive in your certainty that something real was present, that the moments of genuine meeting were genuine, that the connection that felt unlike anything you had previously encountered felt that way, because it was unlike anything you had previously encountered for both of you. You were not wrong. That is not a small thing. In fact, so many people who have been through this, who have spent the aftermath of an avoidant relationship quietly dismantling their own perceptions, second-guessing the evidence of their own feeling, wondering if the whole thing was a story they told themselves. Being handed back the truth of their own experience is the most healing thing that can happen. You were not wrong. The love was real. It was real on your side, and it was real on theirs, however inadequately theirs could express itself, however thoroughly theirs was overridden by the fear that has been running their relational life since before they can remember. That reality does not obligate you to wait for them, does not require you to hold your life in suspension, pending their readiness, does not mean the love that was real will also be able, in practical terms, to become the relationship you needed. It simply means you can stop doubting what you felt, stop auditing the evidence, stop wondering if you were alone in something that you were never alone in. You weren't. The grief that this particular truth carries, there is a specific grief in this. It is not the grief of having loved someone who didn't love you back. That grief, while terrible, has a particular resolution available to it. The resolution of, they did not love me enough, and I am allowed to release the love I had for them because it was not adequately met. This grief does not have that resolution because the love was mutual, because the refusing proves that the love on their side is real and ongoing. And the grief of a mutual love that cannot find its way into a sustainable present is different from the grief of unrequited love in ways that are extraordinarily difficult to hold. It is the grief of something real that is also, for now or possibly permanently, impossible. The grief of two people who love each other across a distance that love alone cannot close. The grief of a refusing that is true and also insufficient. the grief of being loved by someone who loves you and cannot yet be available to you. That grief is enormous. It does not have clean edges. It does not respond to the usual comforts. It does not benefit from being told that there are other people, better matches, loves, that will come that won't carry this particular cost. It needs, simply, to be grieved fully, without the rush toward resolution, without the pressure to convert the grief into something more manageable, or more socially acceptable, or more consistent with having moved on. The grief of mutual love that cannot be held is its own thing, and it deserves its own time, and it is entirely, legitimately, heartbreakingly yours. The thing that refused in you to one final thing. The avoidant tried to stop loving you, and something refused. And you have tried, probably, to stop loving them. Have tried to reach the emotional equivalent of what they reached. The managed distance, the forward momentum, the life that looks, from the outside, like someone who has processed and moved past. And something in you has also refused, not as a failure, not as evidence of unhealthy attachment or insufficient self-work or an inability to detach that reflects poorly on the growth you have done, but as the simple, human, entirely understandable persistence of something real. Your love refuses too, and the refusing in you, like the refusing in them, is not the same as being unable to move forward, is not the same as being stuck, is not evidence that the healing hasn't happened, or isn't happening, or isn't possible. It is simply the love in its most honest form, persisting not because you haven't tried to release it, but because the things that are genuinely real do not release on a schedule. Do not dissolve because dissolution would be convenient. Do not stop being what they are because being what they are is inconvenient. The love in you refuses to, and you are allowed to hold it, to feel its weight without being governed by it, to carry the truth of what this was, mutual, real, rare, genuinely significant, without letting the carrying prevent you from also building the life that exists alongside it. You are allowed to love someone who is not ready, and to grieve the distance between their love and their readiness, and to build, in that grief, the most honest and most genuinely yours life that you can build, not instead of the love, alongside it, both things, the love that refuses to stop and the life that refuses to wait. Both of those things can be yours at once. They already are. And the fact that both are true, that you can carry a love that refuses while also building a life that does not wait, is the most complete expression of what this entire journey has been teaching you. You are large enough for both. You always were. The avoidant tried to stop loving you, and something inside them refused, continued. There is a place this conversation has not gone yet, not because what has already been said is incomplete. It isn't. But because there is a layer beneath the psychology, beneath the attachment theory, beneath even the honest and necessary grief work of understanding what this was and what it cost, that has not been named directly. It is the layer that asks not what happened, and not why it happened, and not even what to do with what happened, but what it means about love, what it means about the nature of genuine connection, what it means about the relationship between feeling something real and being able to sustain it, between loving someone and being capable of them. That layer is where this continues, not with more theory, with something closer to the bone. The questions that sit underneath all the understanding and refuse, the word keeps being the right one, to be answered by psychology alone. The question that doesn't have a clean answer here is the question that lives at the center of this experience. The one you have been circling since the beginning, the one all the understanding has been building toward, the one that remains after everything else has been named and held and grieved. Can someone love you genuinely, deeply, in the refusing to stop way that has been described throughout this entire conversation and still be wrong for you? The honest answer is yes. And sitting with that yes is one of the most difficult things this experience asks, because the cultural narrative around love, The story that has been told in every form across every medium for as long as human beings have been telling stories about each other says that real love is enough, that if the love is genuine, it finds a way, that the refusing to stop quality of what the avoidant carries is, if nothing else, the proof that something worth fighting for exists, that the love that won't quit should not be quit on. But that narrative, however beautiful, is not the complete truth. Real love is not always sufficient. Real love, meeting an unprepared interior, cannot always be held, cannot always be converted into the daily, sustained, imperfect but genuine practice of showing up for someone, cannot always survive the terror that runs alongside it in the avoidance nervous system, not because the love is insufficient, but because the fear is also real, also enormous, also refusing to stop. Two refusing things, the love refusing to stop, the fear refusing to stop, and the avoidant living in the unbearable, exhausting, sometimes paralyzing middle of both. The love does not win automatically. The love is not the stronger thing by virtue of being love. The fear was installed earlier, has deeper roots, has more infrastructure, has been running the system longer and more reliably than the love, which arrived uninvited, and has been attempting to reorganize everything since. And so, the yes stands. Someone can love you genuinely and still be, in their current state, wrong for you, not because the love isn't real, but because love without the capacity to sustain it is a kind of beautiful and useless thing, like a river with nowhere to flow, present, real, moving, and unable to become the thing that nourishes. What it means to love someone who cannot hold their own love. This is an experience that has no adequate cultural language. It falls between the categories. It is not being unloved. You were not unloved. It is not being in a bad relationship with a person who mistreated you. The avoidance damage was not malicious. It is not a story about incompatibility in the ordinary sense. The love was real. The connection was genuine. The recognition between you was not manufactured. It is the specific experience of loving someone who is also, in their own way, trying to love you, and watching that love get intercepted by something older and more powerful than either of them before it can arrive. It is loving someone across a distance that exists not in the space between you, but inside them, a distance they did not choose and cannot simply decide to close. It is receiving a love that was real when it was sent and arrived changed, distorted by the transit through a nervous system that experiences the sending of love as vulnerability, and vulnerability as danger, and danger as a signal to retreat. You receive not the love as it was felt, but the love as it survived the system it had to pass through. And receiving that, loving someone whose love arrives to you already half managed, already partially suppressed, always somewhat less than what you could feel it wanting to be, produces an experience that is both more and less painful than simply not being loved. More painful because you know what was there. You felt the full, unmanaged version in the unguarded moments. You know the distance between what they feel and what arrives. You have tasted the thing that keeps being withheld, and knowing what is there and feeling it not arrive in its fullness is a specific and ongoing grief that plain absence would not produce. Less painful in some oblique way, because you were not wrong, because the love was real, because the thing you were certain of was true even when everything else was telling you to doubt it. And there is a kind of sustaining quality to that. Not comfort exactly, but the specific relief of not having been a fool. You were not a fool. You were someone who loved a person whose interior was waging a war their exterior could not fully show. You felt both sides of that war more clearly than the avoidant could feel it themselves. And you stayed, for as long as you stayed, not out of delusion, but out of genuine knowledge of what was there. That knowledge cost you something, and it gave you something, and both of those things are true simultaneously. The education this love provides. Every significant love educates, not in the self-help sense of teaching lessons about what you deserve or what to look for next time. in the deeper sense of genuinely expanding the interior, of producing in you an understanding of human experience, of the complexity and the wound and the extraordinary courage required to be genuinely intimate with another person that you did not have before. This love specifically provides an education that is difficult to name without sounding like you're justifying the pain. So let it be said clearly first, the pain does not need justification. It does not need a lesson attached to it to make it meaningful. It was real, and it was significant, and it was not an appropriate price for whatever it bought you. But there is nevertheless something here, something that this specific experience, with this specific and irreducible dynamic, has produced in you that is genuinely yours now, that cannot be taken back even when the relationship is, that you carry forward as a kind of hard-won intimacy with the complexity of human beings. You understand now, in a way that is felt rather than merely known, that people are not always capable of the love they feel, that the gap between feeling and capacity is real and wide and not filled simply by wanting, that someone can carry genuine love for you and still be someone whose presence in your daily life does not serve your flourishing, that loving someone is not the same as being right for them, that being loved by someone is not the same as being well loved by them. These understandings are significant. They are not available without something like this. They cannot be arrived at through good information or thoughtful analysis. They require the lived experience of loving someone who loved you back and still could not stay, of being certain of the love, and also certain that the love, as it currently existed, was not enough. You carry those understandings now, not as consolation for what you lost, as genuine additions to who you are, as the specific, irreplaceable depth that comes from having been all the way inside something real and difficult and humanly complicated. The avoidance interior when the refusing gets loudest. There are specific periods in the avoidance life, after the separation, after the attempted moving on, after the strategies have been deployed and found insufficient, when the refusing is at its loudest, when the suppression requires the most effort and produces the least results, when the love that has been managed and contained and filed is making itself known in a way that cannot be ignored. These periods often coincide with transitions, the kind of life moments that lower defenses generally, an illness, a loss, a significant change in the external structure of their life that removes the scaffolding of routine and productivity they rely on to stay ahead of what they feel. In those moments, the avoidance interior is neither the composed, managed thing they present, nor the dramatic, grief-stricken thing that the outside world might expect from someone who is clearly carrying something. It is something quieter and stranger, and more specifically uncomfortable than either. It is the experience of being unable to locate themselves. The self-sufficiency narrative, the story that has been the load-bearing wall of their identity for decades, has a crack in it now. Because the self-sufficiency narrative says they do not need anyone, and the refusing says otherwise. And these two things cannot both be entirely true. And the avoidant, standing in the middle of that contradiction, cannot simply choose one and let the other go. They are equally matched, the narrative and the refusing. Equally old, equally embedded, equally unwilling to concede. And so the avoidant exists in these moments in a kind of internal suspension, not knowing which version of themselves is true. Not the self-sufficient doesn't need any one version they have been performing. Not the person who loves you and cannot stop loving you. That version is too exposed, too vulnerable, too lacking in the infrastructure of self-concept that would be required to hold it. Something in between. Someone in the process of not knowing who they are. That state, that genuine, uncomfortable, disorienting not knowing, is actually the most hopeful state the avoidant can be in. Because the self they knew was built around not feeling, built around not needing, built around the management and suppression of precisely the refusing that is now refusing harder than it ever has. And the crumbling of that self, however painful, however disorienting for them, is the prerequisite for the building of a different one, a self that can hold what they feel. That can be with the love without converting it immediately into a problem to be solved, or a threat to be managed, or a malfunction to be corrected. That self is available to them. It is not guaranteed, but it is available, and the refusing is the thing cracking open the space for it to emerge. The timing that cannot be controlled. You have probably thought about timing, about whether this is simply a matter of when, of the avoidant arriving at the place they need to arrive at eventually, and whether that eventually lands within the timeline of your patience and your life and your willingness to keep carrying the love that refuses in you alongside the life that is always, always also happening. The timing is genuinely not yours to control, and the explicit acknowledgement of that is not resignation. It is the specific kind of clarity that allows you to make actual decisions rather than suspended ones. The avoidance readiness has a timeline that belongs entirely to them. It is shaped by factors that have nothing to do with you. The pace of their self-awareness, the quality of the support around them, the specific accumulation of internal evidence required before their system decides the pattern is more costly than the vulnerability of changing it. The presence or absence of a therapeutic relationship that provides the container for the change. The life circumstances that either support or inhibit the kind of stillness and self-examination that genuine change requires. None of those factors are yours. None of them are available to you to influence through patience, or through absence, or through any configuration of yourself, however genuine and however well constructed. The timeline is theirs, which means the question you are actually holding is not when will they be ready. It is, how long are you willing to live in the uncertainty of not knowing? How much of your own one life you are willing to spend in the suspended state of loving someone who is not yet available to be loved in the way you need. Whether the love that refuses in you is something you want to carry indefinitely, or whether there is a point at which carrying it becomes a choice that is no longer in service of the life you actually want to build. These are not rhetorical questions. They are genuine, specific, require an honest answer questions. And the answers are yours to find. Not through what the avoidant does or doesn't do. Through what you know about yourself, about what you need, about the shape of the life you are trying to build, and whether the suspended state is compatible with the building. There is no right answer. There is only the honest one. And the honest one changes as you change, as the grief moves, as the life builds alongside the waiting, as the love that refuses in you gradually, unevenly, without announcement begins to shift from the foreground to the background of who you are, not gone, but no longer the primary weather. Pay attention to when that shift happens. It is important information about where you actually are and what you actually need now. The love letter that was never sent, the avoidant, has in some form or another composed it, not necessarily on paper, not necessarily in words, but in the interior, in the quiet of the moments when the refusing was at its loudest and the management protocol had briefly lost the argument. They have composed what they would say if saying were possible. If the self-sufficiency narrative did not make the vulnerability of saying feel like standing in open air with nothing beneath, if the rules did not make the reaching feel like the thing they were built to prevent, if the love that refuses in them had a clear and available path to the outside, rather than the circuitous, suppressed, arrives as distance when it wanted to arrive as warmth throughout, it has always been forced to take. It would say something like this: you are not what I expected, not in the way that phrase usually functions, not as a compliment about exceeding low expectations, but in the more fundamental sense that you did not fit the category I had prepared. I had categories for everyone, systems for managing what people meant to me and how close to allow them and what it would cost to keep them at the appropriate distance. You did not fit the system. You kept arriving somewhere the system said you couldn't be, and I kept adjusting the system and you kept not fitting, and eventually I ran out of adjustments, and you were simply there, inside the thing I had built to keep people outside. I did not know what to do with that. I still do not know what to do with that. What I know is that I tried. I tried to make it smaller. To make you smaller, not in the way that sounds, not to diminish you, but to diminish the size of what you meant so that managing the meaning would become possible. It did not work. The meaning refused to be managed. You refused to be managed into something smaller than what you were. And I am something that I do not have a clean word for, standing in the place where the managing used to work and finding it does not work anymore. I know what I cost you, not in detail, not in the way that requires being told, but in the way that someone who paid close attention always knows. I cost you the patience you gave and the hope you held, and the version of yourself that existed before you learned, through me, to doubt the fullness of your own feeling. I cost you that, and I have no way to give it back, and I am sorry in the specific way that people are sorry for things they did not choose and also did not prevent. The love is still here. I want you to know that I tried to stop it and it would not stop. And I have mostly stopped trying. It lives where it lives. It is yours even when I cannot be. That letter exists, somewhere in the interior of the person who tried to stop and could not. It has never been sent because the sending would require everything the system was built to protect against. But it exists, and you knowing it exists, not because it changes what is practically possible, not because it resolves the grief or answers the timing question or tells you what to do, but simply because it is true. You are loved in the full and refusing and cannot be managed away sense by someone who does not yet know how to deliver that love to you. That is a specific and extraordinary thing. It is also not sufficient, and holding both of those truths, the extraordinariness and the insufficiency, without resolving them into something more comfortable, is the most honest place you can stand in relation to this. It was real. It was not enough. Both completely true. Both yours to carry, not as a burden, as the full, complex, genuinely lived truth of what this was, which is, in the end, the only thing any love owes us, not the ending we wanted, the truth of what it was. And this, all of this, was real.